Imagine a world where crossing a street could cost you your life, where a single stamp on a passport decided whether you breathed free air or disappeared into a prison camp. In the Cold War's darkest years, behind the iron fences and watchtowers of the Soviet Bloc, thousands dreamed of escape, but only a handful ever made it. And when they did, it was often thanks to secret operations run by the CIA, covert missions that used fake identities, underground tunnels, and even fishing boats under moonless skies. This is the untold story of the CIA's escape operations, where ordinary men and women risked everything to cheat the system, outwit the KGB, and cross a border designed never to be crossed. The end of World War II left Europe cut in two. On one side stood the West, promising freedom. On the other stood the East, locked under the grip of Moscow. From East Berlin to Prague, from Warsaw to Budapest, barbed wire and checkpoints became the new geography of life. Travel was restricted. Borders were sealed. Dissent was silenced. For many, the dream of escape wasn't just political, it was survival. Intellectuals, artists, defectors, and even ordinary families trapped by history wanted out. But the Soviet Bloc wasn't designed to let people leave. The KGB, border guards, and surveillance networks turned every journey into a death sentence. And this is where the CIA stepped in. Not with armies, not with open declarations, but with covert escape operations. A secret war fought in safe houses, sewers, forests, and embassy hallways. If the Cold War had a stage, it was Berlin. Divided into East and West, the city became the ultimate pressure point of freedom versus control. After the Berlin Wall was built in 1961, crossing over became nearly impossible. Towers, dogs, machine guns, and concrete stretched for miles. But the CIA, along with West German intelligence, turned Berlin into an escape laboratory. They dug tunnels beneath the wall. They forged documents that fooled even the most suspicious guards. They hid families in car trunks, disguised defectors as foreign diplomats, and even used sewer systems to slip under checkpoints. One daring escape involved a family stuffed inside a hollowed-out Volkswagen. The father had contacts in the West who coordinated with CIA operatives. At the checkpoint, a guard tapped the car's trunk, unaware that beneath the metal, 3 terrified children held their breath. The car rolled forward. Minutes later, the family burst into tears of joy. They were free. These escapes weren't just stories of courage. They were battles of wits. Every success forced the Soviets to tighten control, and every failure cost lives. What made these operations work? Tradecraft. The CIA became masters of deception. Forged passports carried stamps that looked indistinguishable from the real thing. Identities were crafted with backstories so detailed they could withstand hours of interrogation. Sometimes the disguise was bold. An agent posing as a Swedish businessman might escort a defector through a checkpoint, relying on diplomatic immunity. Other times it was humble. Families disguised themselves as tourists on bus trips. Children were taught fake names, fake birthdays, even fake lullabies, because one slip of the tongue could unravel everything. The CIA even used diplomatic pouches and vehicles, immune from searches under international law, to smuggle out individuals and sensitive documents. It was a loophole in plain sight. Berlin wasn't the only escape route. Across the Soviet bloc, CIA stations engineered daring flights to freedom. In Poland, fishermen ferried defectors across the Baltic Sea under cover of night. In Czechoslovakia, trucks with false compartments smuggled writers and political dissidents across mountains. In Hungary, CIA handlers coordinated with underground churches to move families through safe houses, one farm to the next, until they reached Austria. Perhaps the most cinematic escapes were maritime. On moonless nights, CIA-linked boats met desperate swimmers just beyond Soviet waters. Survivors later recalled the terrifying silence, the slap of waves, the fear of spotlights sweeping across the dark water, and the sudden relief of a strong hand pulling them aboard. But not every story was a triumph. For every escape that succeeded, There were many that ended in tragedy. A young Soviet naval officer once attempted to defect using a fishing boat rendezvous. Fog rolled in. The CIA boat never appeared. The officer was captured and vanished into a gulag. Another family, relying on forged papers, was caught at the border when their child accidentally used his real name. They were sent back, their fate sealed. The KGB knew these operations existed, and they countered ruthlessly. They planted double agents in émigré communities, monitored embassies, and staged sting operations to lure would-be defectors. The CIA had to adapt constantly, changing routes, altering signals, never using the same method twice. Behind the daring headlines were broken lives. For defectors, escape was only the beginning. Once free, they faced a new reality, exile. Many never saw their families again. Others struggled with paranoia, fearing KGB assassins, even in safe Western cities. Some defectors were used for intelligence, interrogated for months, and then left adrift in societies they didn't understand. CIA officers themselves carried heavy burdens. They had to make impossible choices, whom to save and whom to leave behind. Resources were limited. Political considerations mattered. The line between humanitarian rescue and cold intelligence value was blurred. Was this about freedom or about gaining secrets? The truth was, it was both. Among the most legendary operations was Operation Gold, a joint CIA-MI6 project in 1955 that dug a 1,500-foot tunnel under East Berlin to tap Soviet phone lines. Though later compromised, it symbolized the ingenuity of the time. Another iconic moment came in 1981 when Polish dissidents, hunted by the regime, were smuggled out under the cover of cultural exchanges. CIA handlers transformed poets and professors into delegates with false credentials, slipping them into Western conferences where they defected. But often the greatest stories were never publicized. A child hidden in a suitcase, a dissident disguised as a janitor, a scientist spirited out in a fake cargo shipment. Each was a miracle of detail, timing, and luck. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, the world watched as East Germans surged through checkpoints that had once been death traps. Escape operations, once the backbone of CIA activity in Europe, suddenly became obsolete. People could walk across freely. The missions of tunnels, forged papers, and smuggled families faded into history, but their legacy remains. These operations weren't just spy games, they were lifelines. They showed that in the darkest times, human ingenuity could break even the strongest walls. So here's the question. Were CIA escape operations acts of heroism, small rebellions of freedom against tyranny, or were they calculated tools of Cold War chess, saving only those useful to the West? Tell me in the comments which escape story shook you the most. The hidden Volkswagen family, the midnight fisherman, or the embassy dashes. And if you want more real stories from the shadows of history, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Because this was just one chapter, and the Cold War is full of secrets still waiting to be told. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.